I found my wife's secret on a Tuesday afternoon in April. She'd been gone 2 months. The envelope said, "For Leonard, don't show Rodney, my own son." That's when I knew we had a problem. My name is Leonard Whitfield. I'm 67 years old, retired mechanical engineer, Dayton, Ohio, married to Lorraine for 38 years. I thought I knew everything about that woman. Turns out I didn't. And finding out I was wrong is the best thing that ever happened to me. Lorraine died on a Thursday in February, congestive heart failure. She'd been slowing down for about a year, and by the end, we both knew how it was going. I held her hand when she went. Our son Rodney was in the parking lot, taking a call from his wife, Phyllis. I never forgot that. The grief wasn't the loud kind. It was more like a heavy coat you can't take off. You just learn to carry it. I moved through the first weeks the way you do. Thank you notes, returning casserole dishes, a lot of sitting in the kitchen staring at the wall. 2 months after the funeral, I finally got to the garage. Lorraine kept her side of the garage the way she kept everything. Labeled bins, sorted shelves, nothing out of place. I was working through the metal cabinet in the far corner, the one that smelled like WD-40 and old newspapers, when I found it tucked behind a box of tax records from the early 2000s. A plain white envelope, her handwriting on the front. For Leonard? Don't show Rodney. I stood there for a long moment, dusty light coming through the small window. Hands completely still. I didn't open it in the garage. I went inside, locked the back door, sat down at the kitchen table where Lorraine and I had eaten probably 10,000 breakfasts together. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside, a handwritten note, a small brass key, and a slip of paper with a name and address. First Central Savings, 2240 Briarwood Avenue, branch manager, Gary Lawson. A safe deposit box. Lorraine had a safe deposit box I never knew about. I read the note twice, then a third time. Leonard, there are things I should have told you sooner. I was wrong to wait. Everything in this box is yours and yours alone. Please speak to Gary Lawson before you speak to anyone else, especially Rodney. I love you. I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave enough. Brave enough. I set the note down. Lorraine wasn't afraid of anything. She'd sat with me through my bypass surgery, through her mother's long decline, through every hard thing we ever faced together. If she needed courage to tell me something, that one word scared me more than anything else in that envelope. I should tell you something about Rodney and his wife before I go further. In the weeks after Lorraine's funeral, they'd already started circling. It was subtle at first. Rodney mentioned twice that he and Phyllis were stretched thin financially. He used the word estate, about our house on Millbrook Lane. 3 bedrooms, a vegetable garden out back, a Ford in the driveway. He called it an estate like it was some kind of country manor. Phyllis was not a cruel woman exactly. She was a strategic one. She'd come from a family that once had money and didn't anymore, and she'd married Rodney, I'd long suspected, as a plan. Over the years, I'd watched her quietly reshape my son, his priorities, his loyalties. The way he talked about the future, he stopped calling just to talk. He called when he needed something, or when she needed something through him. I'd given them both the benefit of the doubt. You do that. That's what fathers do. But Lorraine had hidden something from her own son deliberately, and she'd written "Don't show Rodney" like she'd been thinking about those 3 words for a long time. That told me everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table at 4 a.m. with cold coffee and went through everything I thought I knew about our finances. Joint checking, modest savings, life insurance already filed, all ordinary, all accounted for. Lorraine had been careful with money her whole life. No surprises, no debt, no extravagance, but there was a key on my nightstand by 6 a.m. I'd made 3 decisions. First, I would go to First Central Savings alone, not with Rodney. Not with anyone Rodney suggested. Second, I'd call Earl Garland. He was my attorney. A man I'd known for 30 years since we coached Little League together. Good man, steady, the kind who doesn't get rattled. Third, I'd tell Rodney nothing until I understood what I was dealing with. Was that deception? Maybe, but Lorraine had kept a secret for reasons I didn't yet understand, and she had specifically asked me to keep it too. She knew Rodney, she loved him, and still wrote, "Don't show our son." That told me everything I needed to know about what I was walking into. I put on my good slacks, put the key in my coat pocket, and waited for the bank to open. First Central Savings was a quiet bank on Briarwood Avenue, the kind with low voices and potted ferns that looked like they'd been there since the Carter administration. I arrived when the doors opened at 9. Asked for Gary Lawson by name. Watched the young woman at the front desk adjust her expression just slightly. The look of someone who'd been told to expect a particular visitor. Gary Lawson was maybe 61, silver-haired, the careful kind of quiet you see in men who've spent decades handling other people's private matters. He shook my hand and led me to a small office in the back. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, "I'm glad you came." Lorraine told me you'd probably take a few months. You knew her well. She opened the box about 9 years ago, came in once or twice a year after that. We'd have coffee. He folded his hands on the desk. She trusted you completely, said so every time. 9 years, I sat with that for a moment. For 9 years, Lorraine had made quiet trips to this bank, and I'd had no idea. She'd have mentioned she was running errands, going to return something, stopping by the library. I'd never thought twice about it. The safe deposit box was larger than I expected. Gary led me to the vault room and left me alone with it. I set it on the table and lifted the lid. I had to sit down. 3 things inside. First, a bound ledger, handwritten in Lorraine's neat print. A record of investments going back to 2004, mutual funds. A rental property in Indiana I'd never heard of. Stock positions in companies whose names I recognized from things she'd mentioned over the years in passing page after page, every entry dated, every total calculated. The final number, updated last January, was written at the bottom of the last page in plain figures, $437,000. I read it again. My hands were not steady. Second, a manila folder with the deed to a small rental house in Terre Haute, Indiana, generating income routed to a separate account in both our names, but with a P.O. box for correspondence I'd never seen. Third, a sealed letter addressed to me, longer than the note from the garage. I won't share all of it. Some of it is too private. But the core of it was this: Lorraine had watched Phyllis for years. She'd watched the way Phyllis talked about money, not as something you earn and save, but as something you position yourself to receive. She'd watched Phyllis slowly steer Rodney away from us, 1 year at a time, the way you redirect a stream 1 stone at a time. She'd come to believe that if the full extent of what we'd saved were ever known, it wouldn't be safe. She hadn't hidden it from me. She'd hidden it through me. Built something invisible to be handed to me at the right moment, only when she was gone, only when I needed it. She'd been protecting me from our own daughter-in-law. I sat in that vault room for a long time. Then I photographed every document with my phone, placed everything back exactly as I'd found it, and asked Gary to note in the bank's records that I had sole access. Flag any attempt by any other party. He nodded like he'd been expecting that exact request. I drove home on the interstate with the radio off, both hands on the wheel. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I understood the shape of what I was facing. It wasn't just grief anymore. It wasn't just money. It was a choice about what kind of man I was going to be. I called Earl Garland before I even got inside the house. Earl had a small office above a dry cleaning shop on Fenmore Street. Nothing fancy. Mismatched chairs, stacks of folders, a coffee maker that looked older than me. But everything worked, and so did Earl. He was 63, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from 3 decades of watching people underestimate him. I laid everything out on his desk, the photos of the ledger, the deed, the account statements, Lorraine's letters. He read without interrupting, asked me 3 questions, then he sat back. Lorraine was smart, he said. She was. The account is legally yours. The deed transfers cleanly under the will. No ambiguity here, Leonard. He tapped the photo of the ledger. What you're describing with Rodney and his wife isn't a legal threat yet, but it could become one fast if you're not ahead of it. We spent 2 hours that afternoon mapping out a plan. Earl would file formal probate on all assets, including the previously undisclosed ones, with full documentation. Everything transferred solely into my name. The Indiana property would be professionally appraised and placed under management, and we'd build a clear record that I had sought independent legal counsel, that I'd been advised fully, and that no other party had been involved in my decisions. That last piece was the shield. He also recommended a financial advisor named Carol Mattis, steady, experienced, someone Earl had worked with for years. I said I'd call her. I executed each step over the following 2 weeks, met with Carol, reviewed every account, signed the documents at Earl's office, arranged the Indiana property assessment, did all of it quietly, without a word to Rodney. The whole time, I kept answering Rodney's calls warmly, listening to his suggestions, saying nothing. Then something happened that I hadn't expected. About 10 days after my visit to the bank, Gary Lawson called me. He said he wanted to let me know professionally and off the record that someone had called the bank 2 days before my visit. They hadn't given a name. They'd asked general questions about whether accounts could be accessed by family members after a death, whether joint accounts required both signatures, and whether a branch manager would be the right person to speak to about a deceased customer's holdings. Gary said the call came from a number registered to a consulting firm. He'd looked it up after my visit. The firm was Phyllis's employer. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Phyllis had been moving before I even found the envelope. She'd been asking the right questions before I knew there was anything to ask about. That meant she'd suspected something existed. She just hadn't known what or where. And she'd been 2 days behind me the entire time. I didn't call Earl about it that night. I just sat with it, filed it away. The way you do when something confirms what you already suspected but doesn't change what you're doing. I kept being warm on the phone. I kept saying nothing. It was Phyllis who broke first. She called on a Wednesday afternoon about 3 weeks after my bank visit. Her voice was different. The practiced warmth was gone. She said she'd heard I'd visited the bank and met with the branch manager. She didn't say how she knew. She said she and Rodney felt they had a right to be involved in any major financial decisions. She used the phrase family decisions 3 times. I kept my voice even. I told her I was handling matters through legal counsel and that she was welcome to review the probate filing when it was submitted as public record. 20 minutes later, Rodney called. He wasn't as controlled as Phyllis. His voice had that tight, cornered quality I remembered from when he was a teenager. He said I was being secretive. He said his mother would have wanted him involved. He said he had rights as the only heir. I'm not gone yet, Rodney, I said. And neither is your mother's will, which names me as sole beneficiary. A pause. Then he said something in a flat, low voice that didn't sound like my son. We know about the box, Dad. We know it's more than what was in the will. If you're not going to be reasonable, we're going to have to look at whether Mom was in the right state of mind when she set this up. Mental incapacity. They were going to challenge the estate on the grounds that Lorraine hadn't been competent. My hands were cold. My voice was not. That's your right, I said. Earl Garland is my attorney. His number is publicly listed. Any communication from this point goes through him. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after that. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't shaken. There's something specific about being threatened by your own child. Someone whose first steps you watched, whose nightmares you sat up with at 2 a.m. The fear was real, but underneath it was something harder. I thought about Lorraine's letter. I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave enough. She'd been afraid too. She'd still done the right thing. I could do no less. I gave myself 5 days, drove to my sister Harriet's house in Columbus. Let her feed me and talk at me and remind me I was still somebody's little brother. Walked her dog twice a day. Slept 8 hours a night. When I came back, I was ready. The flowers arrived the day after I got home. Lilies and white roses. Expensive ones. The card read, Dad, we love you. We were out of line. Can we start over? Rodney and Phyllis? I set them on the kitchen counter and looked at them for a while. They were beautiful. That was exactly the point. Phyllis called that evening. Soft voice, rebuilt warmth. She said they'd been under so much stress. That losing Lorraine had hit Rodney harder than he'd let on. She asked if I'd come to Sunday dinner just to clear the air. She said gently that there was surely enough for the whole family. Enough for the whole family. There it was. The flowers were a down payment on a different kind of conversation. One where I'd sit at their table and be gently, warmly persuaded to share what Lorraine had deliberately and legally left to me alone. I thanked her for the flowers. Said I needed more time. Kept my voice warm and impossible to argue with. When I set the phone down, I felt something I hadn't expected. Clarity. The quiet, settled kind, not the effortful kind where you're working to stay calm. The kind that arrives when you stop hoping the situation will resolve itself and you accept that you're the one who has to resolve it. I threw the flowers away, not out of spite. I just didn't want them in my house. That week I did something I should have done months earlier. I called people. My neighbor Arlene, who'd been checking in since the funeral and who I'd been politely deflecting. My old friend Marvin, widowed 6 years ago, who understood certain things without being told. My pastor Perry Cole, not for a sermon, just for the company of someone whose intentions I trusted, and I called Claudette, Rodney and Phyllis's daughter, 24 years old, living in Portland. She'd texted me quietly a few weeks back, Grandpa, I don't know what's going on, but if you need anything, please call me. I hadn't called because I didn't want to put her in the middle, but that text had stayed with me. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for an hour. She was careful with her words. She didn't criticize her parents directly, but she confirmed in the quiet way of someone choosing exactly what to say that there had been a lot of conversation in her parents' house about money and about what her grandmother had left behind. She said she hadn't been comfortable with it. I didn't ask her to take sides. I just asked her to stay in my life. She said she wasn't going anywhere. None of these people knew the details. I kept that close, but their presence reminded me of one important thing. I was not isolated. I was not alone. Phyllis may have imagined that a 67-year-old widower still fogged by grief would be easy to press into a corner. She hadn't accounted for the fact that I'd spent 38 years building a life with real people in it. They came on a Saturday morning in late June. I saw Rodney's car pull into the driveway from the upstairs window, felt my stomach tighten for a second. Then I reminded myself, you're ready for this. I went downstairs, put the kettle on, and opened the front door with a composed face. Phyllis was carrying a bakery box. Croissants from the good place on Riverside, the ones I'd always liked. She was dressed just casually enough to look like she hadn't tried. Rodney looked tired. There was something around his eyes that might have been genuine exhaustion. He had Lorraine's cheekbones. In that morning light, standing on my porch, he looked more like his mother than he had in years. I held that thought at arm's length and stepped back to let them in. I served coffee, set the croissants on a plate. We sat at the kitchen table where I had read Lorraine's letter, where I had made my decisions, where I had cried and steadied myself more than once. I knew every scratch on that table. I sat at the head of it. Phyllis opened gently. She talked about how hard the last few months had been for everyone, about how grief makes people do things they regret, about family, how at the end of the day, family is all any of us have. She told a story about Lorraine teaching Rodney to cook scrambled eggs when he was 9, warm detail, well delivered. She had a gift for making rehearsed things sound spontaneous. Then the conversation shifted. Slowly, smoothly enough that you'd miss it if you weren't watching for it. She mentioned a family mediator, not a lawyer, she was quick to say, just someone who helped families navigate difficult transitions. She suggested a mediated conversation might be healthier than going through attorneys. She said the word attorneys the way some people say disease. She said that Lorraine surely hadn't intended to create conflict, that she would have wanted harmony, that perhaps there were ways to honor her legacy together. I noticed that in 40 minutes of careful conversation, Phyllis did not once ask how I was doing, not in passing, not as filler. My well-being did not come up. Rodney leaned forward. His voice was quieter than Phyllis's, more direct. He said he wasn't trying to take anything from me. He just wanted to feel like his mother had thought about him, had cared about his future. His voice cracked slightly on the word mother. I watched it happen and held my own reaction carefully, because here was the thing. I believed the pain was real. Rodney had lost his mother. Whatever Phyllis had shaped him into over the years, that loss was genuine. But genuine pain does not entitle anyone to someone else's property. And the structure of this conversation, the croissants, the mediator suggestion, the carefully managed emotion was not the structure of reconciliation. It was the structure of a negotiation where one party had been set up to feel that saying no was cruelty. I had spent 30 years as an engineer. I knew how to read a structure. I knew when something had been built to hold weight, it wasn't meant to hold. I let them finish. Didn't rush them, let every word land. Then I folded my hands on the table. I love you, Rodney, I said. That's not in question. I looked at him steadily. But I'm not going to discuss the estate outside of proper legal channels, not because I'm hostile to you, because your mother asked me to handle things carefully, and I intend to do that. Phyllis's expression shifted, just a flicker, quickly managed. But I saw it. Dad, Rodney's voice had changed. The crack was gone, replaced by that flat tightness I recognized from his teenage years. Do you understand that if you refuse to work with us, we will file the incapacity challenge? Do you know how that looks? A man your age making major financial decisions alone, refusing his own family's involvement. I understand, I said. Earl Garland has already prepared a response. I suggest you speak with your own attorney before you decide to move forward. We have documentation, Phyllis said. Her voice was precise now, controlled. We have correspondence from the last year of Lorraine's life that suggests she was not always clear-minded. We have people who will testify. I knew they were bluffing. I knew it because Lorraine's physicians had documented her cognitive evaluations. Because Gary Lawson had met with her regularly for 9 years and would attest to her clarity. Because the ledger itself, maintained to the penny through last January, was the work of a fully capable mind. A person with cognitive decline does not keep records like that. Anyone who looked at that ledger for 5 minutes would understand it immediately. Whatever they had, it was not enough. And I suspected they knew it too. This threat was a last pressure point because all the softer ones had failed. Then file, I said. They left without finishing their coffee. Phyllis picked up her purse with a controlled movement of someone holding something larger inside. Rodney didn't look at me on the way out, not from cruelty, I thought. From shame. That part stayed with me after the door closed. I stood at the kitchen window and watched Rodney's car back out of the driveway. My heart was beating faster than I'd have liked. I won't pretend otherwise. Being threatened by your own kid is its own specific kind of hard. The fear moved through me like cold water, but so did something else. Every threat they made tightened my resolve another degree, like a bolt being set. If they were certain they could win this, they wouldn't have come here with croissants. I called Earl. They threatened to file, I told him. Let them, he said. We're ready. I believed him. I put the leftover croissants in a bag and took them to Arlene next door. I didn't want them in my house either. The incapacity challenge was filed on a Monday morning in July. Earl called before I finished my first cup of coffee. He sounded the way he always sounded. Precise. Unhurried, faintly satisfied, like a man watching an opponent make exactly the move he'd been expecting. They filed, he said, petition alleging Lorraine suffered cognitive decline in her final years and that the undisclosed assets were accumulated under diminished capacity. They're asking for redistribution under standard intestate succession, roughly half to you, half to Rodney. What's our position? I asked, though I already knew. Strong, he said. Very strong. I've spent the last month building it. Our response was a complete package. Lorraine's medical records from her final 3 years. Cognitive evaluations by both her cardiologist and her primary care physician, both showing no impairment. A signed letter from Gary Lawson attesting that he had met with Lorraine regularly for nearly a decade and had observed no confusion, no unusual behavior, no signs of any diminished capacity. Copies of the ledger showing entries made as recently as 8 weeks before she died. Methodical, dated, cross-referenced. The work of a sharp and organized mind. And then there was something Earl had gathered quietly over the previous weeks, something I hadn't known about until he showed it to me the day before the hearing. Phyllis had made a mistake in her early emails to the mediator she'd contacted, who turned out to be someone she'd used before in a business dispute and not a neutral party at all. She had laid out her strategy in writing. Those emails had been forwarded inadvertently to a third party with a connection to someone in Earl's professional network, legally obtained. That was all I needed to know. What they contained was Phyllis in her own words, written before any pretense of reconciliation. She had described the undisclosed assets as leverage we can use. She had described the mediator plan as a way to get him to the table before he lawyers up fully. And in one sentence I read 3 times, she had called me the old man doesn't know what he has. I set the emails down on Earl's desk. I didn't feel rage. I thought about the croissants, about her warm voice on the phone, about the carefully dressed woman who had sat at my kitchen table for 40 minutes without once asking how I was holding up. All of it planned, all of it written down in her own words, now part of a document that existed in the world regardless of what she wished. I felt the quiet, final click of something locking into place. The morning of the hearing I dressed carefully, navy jacket, good slacks, the watch Lorraine had given me for our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a composed man of 67 who knew what he was doing and had the paperwork to prove it. The courtroom was small. Probate hearings usually are. No jury, no gallery. Just the judge, the attorneys, a court reporter, and us. Rodney and Phyllis were already seated when I arrived, their attorney between them like a seam holding 2 things together. Rodney looked at me when I walked in. Something moved behind his eyes that I couldn't name. Then he looked away. Phyllis did not look at me at all. She was studying a document in front of her with the focused intensity of someone who had decided that eye contact was a concession she could not afford. Earl presented our case with the quiet efficiency of a man who had done this many times and had nothing to prove. He walked the judge through the medical records, through Gary Lawson's letter, through the ledger. He noted the logical impossibility of the incapacity claim given the documentation. Methodical, unhurried, completely convincing. That is what the truth looks like when it is properly assembled. Then he introduced the emails. The moment Phyllis's attorney saw them, he asked for a recess. The judge granted 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, I sat still and watched a crack run through their composed front. Phyllis spoke to her attorney in a low, rapid voice, her hand moving in tight gestures. Rodney was not looking at anyone. He was sitting very still in the way people sit when something inside them has gone quiet. Not calm, emptied. I recognized it. I had sat that way myself in the garage holding an envelope I hadn't opened yet. When the hearing resumed, Rodney took the stand. Earl cross-examined him about specific conversations he had claimed demonstrated Lorraine's confusion, asked him to date those conversations, describe them specifically. He couldn't. At one point, Rodney said quietly, "My mother, I just think she wasn't herself at the end." Earl said, "Did you discuss your concerns about your mother's mental state with any of her physicians while she was alive?" The court reporter's fingers stopped moving. "No," Rodney said. "Did you contact her cardiologist, her primary care physician, or any medical professional with these concerns?" "No. So these concerns about your mother's mental capacity arose after her death." It was not a question.
"Yes," Rodney said. "Thank you. Nothing further."
The judge ruled that afternoon. Petition denied in full. Lorraine's estate remained exactly as filed, wholly in my name, exactly as she had intended. The judge noted in his remarks that the evidence of Lorraine Whitfield's mental acuity was thorough and consistent, and that the petition had been inadequately supported and undermined by the timing and circumstances of its filing. That last phrase was a small, precise cut. I think Phyllis understood it more fully than anyone else in the room. Earl shook my hand in the corridor, firm and brief. I thanked him. Then I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and let myself exhale. One long, slow breath that felt like it had been waiting for months. Then I drove home. The consequences arrived quietly over the following weeks. The emails had not been introduced as criminal evidence. There was no crime in aggressively strategizing about an inheritance dispute. But their contents had been referenced by the judge in his remarks, and they were now part of the public court record. Phyllis had written the word soft target in an email that was now findable by anyone who looked. She had written leverage we can use about a widow's grief. Whatever private justifications she had built around her own behavior, the public version of it was now fixed in documents that did not care about her justifications at all. I did not orchestrate what happened next. I want to be clear about that. I had not contacted anyone in her professional circle. I had specifically asked Earl to keep the proceedings as quiet as possible. What happened was the natural consequence of a court record in a city small enough that people pay attention. By September, Phyllis had been quietly moved out of her position at the consulting firm. She did not find comparable work quickly. The professional world in a city like Dayton is smaller than it looks, and reputations travel through it the way weather does. Consistent, not always fair, but consistent. I heard this from Marvin, who heard it from someone else. I received the information with the same sadness I had come to associate with everything Phyllis related. I had never wanted her humiliated. I had only ever wanted what Lorraine had left me. That those two things turned out to be connected was her doing, not mine. Rodney called once, about 2 weeks after the hearing. He was not angry. He was something worse, defeated. His voice was flat. Stripped of the careful inflections Phyllis usually put into him, he sounded for the first time in years like himself. The self underneath all the layers that had been added and adjusted over a decade of marriage to a woman who needed him to be a particular kind of instrument. He said he was sorry, said he hadn't fully understood what he was doing, said he'd let someone else do his thinking for him, and that he knew it wasn't an excuse. I listened without interrupting. There is a patience you develop as a father, the kind that can hold a long silence without filling it. "Are we okay?" he asked. The question was small and bare. I heard my boy's voice in it, the one from before all of this. "We're not okay right now," I said, "but I'm not done with you." "You understand what I mean by that?" A long pause. "Yeah," he said. "I think so. Then give it time and go talk to somebody. A real somebody, not a mediator. Someone who will tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." He said he would. Quietly, no performance in it. Whether he did was his own business. I had said what was mine to say. I'm his father, not his therapist. Those are not the same thing, though the line can blur. By November, the financial matters were fully closed. Carol Mattis handled the account consolidations without a single complication. The Indiana property was generating steady rental income. Every document filed and confirmed. The estate was fully mine. Not in any grasping sense, in the sense that it was exactly where Lorraine had placed it, with exactly the intention she had carried for 9 years. I used some of the Indiana income to set up a small scholarship fund at the elementary school where Lorraine had volunteered for 12 years. It carries her name. I had the front porch repainted sage green. She had pointed to it in a magazine once and said, "That's a good color." Arlene next door said it changed the whole block. By December, Rodney's calls had started sounding more like my son again. He had begun therapy. He was not asking for anything. Just calling, I was answering. Rebuilding looks like a long series of ordinary Thursday night calls that add up slowly into something you can trust again. I'm not going to wrap that up any neater than it is. On Christmas Eve, I sat in the workshop, poured 2 fingers of bourbon, and took the ledger out of the drawer. Traced the first entry with my finger. March 14th, 2004. I thought about a woman who had carried something invisible for 9 years, trusting that I would know what to do with it when the time came. I had been slow getting there. She knew I would be. She had planned for that too. Lorraine always said I was slow to catch on. She was right, but I caught on. I closed the ledger, put it back in the drawer, and went to make dinner, just me and the dog. Same as every night. But that night felt different. It felt like mine. If this story hit close to home, leave a comment below. Maybe you have been in a position where the people closest to you mistook your grief for weakness. Maybe you stayed quiet and handled it the right way, and nobody ever knew how hard that was. I want to hear from you, and if you know a man who is going through something like this right now, share this with him. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do for someone is let them know they are not the only one.